describe a day like the day you had? I have to ask you, is the work you're doing, because we all have jobs or careers, or some of us want to have a job and a career, but we want to have a calling. Is the work you're doing a calling, a deep desire to do this work, and to do this work within the LGBTQRSTUV?
I think when we just start saying the whole alphabet, we can't offend anybody.
Let's just say A to Z, exactly. Whatever you might be, you are a human being first. Can I get a round of applause for that? You're a human being first. So, is this a calling, a deep desire that you had to seek out injustice, to be a justice seeker on behalf of this community? And if so, when did you first realize you wanted to do something like this?
Well, so it's easier for me to answer the second part of that question than the first part, because I don't know the answer to the first part, actually. I started doing this work when I was 19, and once again, not terribly motivated myself. I had to do an internship for something in college, and I saw a poster that said 40 hours of internship, and I thought, oh, well, I'll do that, because I apparently could not think for myself. But it was at a battered women's shelter in the town that I was going to college in, or in the next town over, and I went to this training. It was 40 hours to become a hotline volunteer, and then you answered the hotline, and I, up until then had probably not done, I did stuff in high school, but it was mostly because, it was something to do. I just had never really felt a passion for things. And I sat down and they started talking about violence against women, very specifically, heterosexual, cisgender violence of men against women. And I thought, oh, right, this is at the core of human rights. If people don't feel safe, then all this other stuff doesn't matter. We can have lots and lots of rights that we will never be able to exercise because we can't leave our house without feeling scared to do that, right? It wasn't particularly queer, although I was queer at the time, and so were all the people that were in the class with me. But the analysis was, this is a long time ago. And the analysis was still very sort of second-wave feminist. It was very men batter women, and that's how we talk about violence in this country. But it just resonated. I was like, oh, right, this, I understand this language. I understand this formula. This makes sense to me in this way that didn't feel, honestly, it didn't feel like a calling or anything justice-related. It just felt like my DNA, oh, right, I get this. I get it. Yes, okay. And that was it. That was, years ago. And since that time, this is what, I've done this, and I've waited tables and done this, So it's in me in some way, if that makes sense.
So in a way, you were discovered.
Yes, someone discovered me, yes. I guess so.
You didn't know you had this great capability to move people and to do the intense level of work you do every day, to gain the respect that you've gained from a lot of people, but you had it in you.
Yes, I think so. One of the things that I get so much credit. I get so many accolades, and everyone tells me how great I am, and of course they're all 100% right about that. No, but I get all of this. There is something about being the executive director that gets you credit for all the work that everybody else has done, right? And so, for example, I'm sitting here. Andrea has worked her you-know-what off for, months and months and months and months with Wonder Women, but she's not sitting here, right? And so I appreciate, and I think I'm good at my job. I love my job. I think I'm good at it. I think I am persuasive. I think I have gotten stuff done. But I don't think it's about me. Like, I think without the team that I have, without the passion that they have, I wouldn't be particularly effective. Like, I'm not a particularly good public speaker. I'm not particularly photogenic. Like, I'm a very, very, private person, like in this way that is the complete antithesis of my job, where I am a very, not just a public person, but I'm like professionally gay, right? Which, like, when did that happen? You know? It's not nearly as fun as it sounds. But I get a lot of credit because of the role that I have, and I worked hard to get here. I feel very passionate about the mission, but like, it's my team, it's the people who do this work every day and just don't get nearly the same attention, that are far more passionate, far more eloquent, far more driven, and full of whatever the thing that drives you forward is, than I will ever be. And I really feed off of their energy and their ideas and their creativity, if that makes sense, right?
It makes absolute sense. It is almost like the yin and yang of life.
Yes.
I would not have a company, an organization called Wonder Women, if there were no women to support this initiative. There were no women who felt they connected to this. And before I go into my next question, my background is I came to this country back in 1993 with my 5-year-old daughter as a survivor of domestic violence. And, an immigrant, everything else, and I worked very hard. And in my country, unlike here, which most people don't understand, when you don't have the support and services of an organization like AVP, you have nothing. And it's so important to reach out to these organizations that are there for you. And I met a gentleman through a friend by the name of Richard Hames.
Andrea, you remember Richard.
And Richard, if you are watching this video tonight, I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being such a great human being, because he opened up his heart to me as a woman with a straight issue of being a survivor of domestic violence and dealing with 2 countries and dealing with immigration and dealing with so many things. And he took me out for lunch. He took time out with me. And I really appreciate that. I'll never forget it. It's one of the reasons why I want to support AVP, because you touched me at a time in my life when I needed that help and that support. And I was an immigrant in a country, and I had nowhere to turn to. So that's a bit of a side note, but I wanted to say publicly, thank you.
Well, and I mean, not me. You're so welcome on behalf of the organization. Richard is, I think, an incredibly amazing person, and really, I think, for the first time at the organization, brought a real focus to the clinical work that we do, to the support work that we do, the counseling and all of that. And I can absolutely see him saying, "Oh, hi, Aliya. Oh, really? I'm sorry. Would you like to go out to lunch? Let's go out to lunch." Like, I can totally see that whole thing happening. And he's been a great inspiration and mentor to me as well since I've been at AVP. He's been somebody I can call and ask, like, how did you make this thing go the last time, So he's really inspirational. I'm not at all surprised to hear that, but really happy to hear that, yeah.
So, I'm going to pause here because I need you guys to be really quiet. Okay. One does not have to be a member of the LGBTQ community to be really upset and disgusted by the level of hate crimes that's going on in the city. I cannot believe we're in 2013 I cannot believe what I'm reading in the news. It is so upsetting. What can we do as a community to help in some way?
Well, I think there's a couple. First of all, one of the things that I've been talking about a lot for the last 6 weeks is, what's this sudden rise in hate violence in New York City? And one of the things I keep reminding folks about is this is not actually a sudden rise in hate violence. This is hate violence that people experience every day in New York City. And yes, we experience it in Chelsea, and yes, we experience it in the West Village. It's also violence that is primarily experienced by transgender people, people of color, and young people, and particularly young transgender people of color. And shockingly, those stories don't make the front page of the New York Times, right? So, I mean, I think this is as much about the media and what they will cover as it is about the rise in hate violence. And certainly, the homicide of Mark Carson was shocking to everyone, and that was unusual and really sort of deeply, deeply disturbing. But the other incidents of violence that we saw throughout the month or the 6 weeks, people being jumped, people being punched, people being, called names, we see that every day. We get more than close to 500 reports of hate violence a year at AVP. So this isn't new for us. The media attention was new. And, while there is nothing good about hate violence, like there is no way that I will say to you, the silver lining of someone being beaten up was, like there's no silver lining. The one thing that does happen when we get this kind of attention is we can raise more awareness, right? So we can say, this stuff happens every day to LGBT people, and I don't see you covering the press conference in the Bronx, but I do see you at Madison Square Garden and in the West Village and in Chelsea. And I don't see you in Queens, where, immigrant women are being profiled all the time. I don't see you on Staten Island. We can sort of call the media on their practices. And hopefully sometimes, I actually said to one of the Times reporters, this is great, but I don't see you in the Bronx talking to us about the transgender women of color that we're working with there. And he said, I want to go, and I want to see that. I want to know about that. And he went, and maybe he'll write a story, and maybe the Times will actually cover the violence that people are experiencing. But in the meantime, I think it's important to know that a spike in violence is more often a reflection of a spike in media attention, right? And it's a much bigger media story when it's a wave of hate violence across New York City than if it's 12 isolated incidents that also happen in February and March and January and December, right? Because one of the things that I think people have been really expressing to us is a deep fear. They're afraid to leave their house, and they're afraid to walk down the block. And that's the last thing we want people to do. The last thing we want is people to feel like they have to go back into the closet or experience violence. Those are the only two options.